So
I did.
now I will, as more people have joined, I will put myself on mute and let you guys go because this is not my topic. I'm here to listen and learn.
Hi,
Oh,
Nancy. Hi, Michael.
Hey guys,
Hey.
I'm ducking in. I apologize. I'm multitasking here, so I won't get on with video, but I am listening in.
no worries. No worries, Nancy. It's a pleasure to have you as well.
Apologies for being late. I was in a different meetup where I was presenting and they had questions. So that's why I'm here now.
Oh,
That's
no
always good,
worries.
though. It's always good to have questions. This is kind of an unconventional edition of this episode of our monthly meetup because it kind of got shifted around and the topic has somewhat morphed. But, if there are any discussion points around, specifically, Nancy, if you have something imaging related that you wanted to talk about, we'd love to focus on that. Otherwise, we were sort of doing a dive into whatever anybody was a little bit interested, semi-clinically related right now.
But I'm interested in anything. I did a computer science degree, but I should have done med school. And I got lucky enough to work at the Mayo Clinic in clinical trials at the tail end of my career. So I was very interested in your topic.
Oh, that's
Excellent.
great. And it's funny and timely. You actually showed up during the middle of a conversation where we were all talking about how we came from industries that had nothing to do with where we were going to be.
Mhm.
And then
Wow.
we ended up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Martin is the one who has a background medically, but Christopher and I come from a little bit different world, business and operations and things like that. And
Yeah, and Eric and Martin work for a medical device regulatory company in Ottawa, Montreal.
Montreal.
And
Actually, Laval.
Laval, right?
I love it.
Yeah. And Michael Young is a clinical consultant and industry expert from the West Coast, California.
It's an international call. Thank you,
Yeah.
Michael, for making it so.
No, I want to. This is a small community, and we all need to support one another. And the one thing that I did want to offer, because one of the things that was intriguing about the imaging side of things is there's been long time debate over whether or not you need centralized readers or whether or not you can do things in a decentralized manner. And I'm kind of curious, given now that we are moving so rapidly to this decentralized trial approach, how do you keep control and quality into the imaging side of things?
That's a great question.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So there's a couple threads here. Nancy, you said you came out of the Mayo Clinic. We have a trial stat. We do a lot of imaging-based trials, whether that's medical device or oncology. And probably 2 years ago, we started a partnership, year and a half, 2 years ago, with Fujifilm and a division they own called TerraMedica, which actually is a spin out from the Mayo Clinic. I think 15 or 20 years ago, they had an initiative to create, I think it was a 50-year medical record, and they needed a way to manage the patient's medical imaging. And there wasn't really anything on the market at the time. And so they built their own and then spun it out once it was up and running, spun it out as a company called TerraMedica. But to get to your point, Michael, it's very difficult to do decentralized reading. Most of the medical viewers, the applications are desktop applications, and they're usually tied to a piece of hardware, either in the clinic or the imaging core lab. And it's difficult for them to do things in a decentralized fashion. And one of the initiatives we've gone through with Fujifilm is to take their imaging viewers and virtualize them. And so we did a project at the end of last year for a client in France who had a set, a collection of their medical imaging from their prior clinical trials, but needed radiologists internationally to be able to view the imaging. And the sponsor's imaging core lab just didn't have the technology to do it. And so they you fast forward, they came to us, and we deployed all of Fuji's technology into Microsoft Azure in the Paris region within France. And then we worked with the Core Lab to integrate the imaging into the vendor neutral imaging archive, and then taught the radiologists how to access the medical viewer remotely, launch it, and then query the database, find the imaging they want to look at. And that actually is a unique capability. There's companies like BioClinica and Parexel. What was the other one, Heather, you mentioned today?
Oh, the other CRO does imaging stuff? Intrinsic.
Intrinsic, yeah. So there's only a handful that can really do these things. And the industry's really gotten shaken up with BioClinica's merger with ERT. And there's a lot of concern that, I mean, no one's saying it on the record, but off the record, there's a lot of concern that that BioClinica is just going to kind of disappear. They're not going to keep the BioClinica brand. It's just going to be ERT. And then Parexel carved off all of their imaging technology and services into Calex. So the two big players are changing, and so there's a lot of disruption in the space, and combined with the discussions we've had with some CROs that specialize in imaging type trials, gastroenterology, GI, oncology. They're frustrated with the tools that they're stuck with like, for example, IBM absorbed Merge, and a lot of the Merge clients or users moved into IBM Clinical, and suddenly they're paying higher rates and getting lower service and no flexibility. So it's really, really hard, Michael. It's really hard. And we're kind of positioning ourselves as the new player on the block from a medical imaging clinical trial perspective. And so we've got the tools and the technology, plus a platform where we can actually deploy our technology in a variety of ways, whether that's in our own data center, in the public cloud with MS Azure or Amazon AWS, or some public-private cloud structure, so a hybrid. And to our knowledge, no one's offering anything like that. And so it looks like we're in a position to actually help companies, imaging core labs, and CROs actually do remote reading, decentralized reading trials.
Yeah, so Chris, this is really an interesting topic, and something, fundamentally, I want to know more about it, because I'm going to be able to help proselytize this for you. I can tell you that I was deeply involved with, without going into a whole lot of particulars, deeply involved with the evolution of virtual scopics in Rochester.
Yeah.
And ultimately they became a part of biotelemetry research.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're talking about in terms of true reading versus what I called harmonized reading, is really a critical differentiation. And I think that's particularly true with regard to the complexity of endpoint management in most of these trials now, especially when you're taking a look at solid tumors. You're looking at, even to the degree of understanding skin tumors and the kinds of imaging that are available there, because a lot of smartphone technology is being used there, but the metrics for all of this and the telemetry involved with this is such that, depending on who your reader is, you've got a positive or a negative or an inconclusive, and no trial likes to be submitted with data that just simply says consistent with. So I certainly will be happy, delighted to know a bit more about this. I'm sure you and Heather can share more with me, but could be an interesting thing to make sure that we've got a little bit more marketing muscle behind.
Yeah, absolutely. We one of the approaches we take in terms of going to market is in working with subject matter experts, key opinion leaders that are out there who can actually influence sponsors and the way in which they design their clinical trials. Because what we're offering is unlike anything that other EDC vendors are offering. And what we found is sponsors are reluctant to do anything new or like run novel trials because they don't have the partners that can do it. And so we spend a lot of time, talking to our partners, our clinical consultant partners and CROs to make sure they understand what we can do, so that when they are talking to their sponsors, they can actually, bring these tools and capabilities to them proactively, as opposed to after the fact, after the protocol's written. So, the more you guys know about what we can do, the better. One of the other consultants we work with is Colin Miller from the Bracken Group. And Colin way back was he was the chief medical officer, I think, at BioClinica when they were, I think, 35 people. And he obviously built out their imaging capabilities at BioClinica. And then, I think 5-6 years ago, went off on his own. Mm-hmm. And he actually worked with us and Fujifilm to adapt their platform for life sciences. Because traditionally in an institution like the Mayo Clinic, it's organized around the various departments in other hospitals or institutions they have, as opposed to organized around a clinical trial and then a clinical imaging study. So, we're actively looking for more consultants that are out there talking to sponsors to help them understand what we can actually do, and how these trials can be run.
Now, and Michael, I don't know if you and Christopher have had a chance to talk about what you're doing. I don't know if you want to, I know you're multitasking, but I don't know if you want to give the group here a little howdy do on what you're up to. And then we can, I know Prem, thanks for joining us. Good to see you again. And anybody else who wants to talk a little bit about what they're doing. We're small enough of a group for everybody to be able to jump in and say a little bit about what they're doing and any asks you have from the group to kind of help connect people. Oh, did we lose Michael? We might have lost Michael.
He's on the other multitask.
He's multitasking. But Nancy, you were mentioning that this was a topic you were interested in, just to jump in and sort of listen. Was there anything that you wanted to ask about or share about what you're doing?
So let me tell you what I did, and I'm retired now, so my interest is kind of varied. I worked at IBM and I switched over to Watson Health. And then we did the clinical trial matching pilot at Mayo Clinic for breast cancer.
Yeah.
And they went from screening 20% of the patients when we started to 100% when we were done.
Wow.
And then we did a pilot in a small cancer organization in Arkansas called Highlands Oncology Group. Mm-hmm. And they're a tiny little place, but their boss just loves doing cool new stuff and being in the press. So he really, really, really wanted to do the trial, and his staff were awesome to work with. So unfortunately, the trials that we picked were so similar, it was hard to prove that the technology was helpful because the patients needed it for all 5 trials were the same. So a human could do it fairly quickly as well.
Yep.
But the staff were just in awe of the fact that suddenly the whole medical record would be searched and all the relevant tidbits of information would be listed and any anomalies in the record would be highlighted. And then it would say what other questions had to be answered to pick if the patient belonged on the trial or not. So then I was able to retire, and I did.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's very good to me.
It's good to have goals.
Yeah, no, your background's fantastic.
Yeah, that's exciting.
It was a great way to learn about the trials from being tossed into it and learned so much. And Mayo is so skillful. And then that little Highlands Oncology, I would trust them with a cancer diagnosis. They were so good at what they did, even though they're little.
That's good to know.
Well, there's a lot to be said for sort of small niche organizations that are really experts in what they do versus sort of getting lost in a bigger shuffle. So it makes sense.
Yeah, we we work with a lot of different CROs internationally, big and small, and it's you just can't say, oh, the big CROs are all great, or you're better off working with a small CRO. It's you've got to really scrutinize who they are first before you make any assumptions about how good or not good they are.
We also learned that there's pockets in a big organization because Mayo wanted to make sure the project was successful, so they put their best people on it.
Yep.
But they alluded to the fact that there were other teams as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the other, I think I call it an opportunity that we're bringing to the market is, and I like this phrase. It's not my phrase. It's Bill Lynch's from Fujifilm, but it's improving the liquidity of medical imaging. These files, unless you're in dermatology, where it's just like a JPEG type picture, the medical imaging files can be massive in size, and then you need specialized viewers to actually see them. And more often than not, up until now, all those imaging files, if it's part of a clinical trial, they end up at the imaging core lab, or some end up at the CRO, and the sponsor doesn't really have a way to manage them. They may even be on like a local network drive in the company, and their assets are just sitting there. And so with the VNA technology, it lets them aggregate that imaging in a structured way that is also non-destructive, and then be able to programmatically give access to those images, whether that's another partner, or for a clinical trial, or for machine learning, or any other scenario you can think of. And a lot of these companies are also looking at how to repurpose the imaging, so license it out, or if they're looking to sell some IP, give other companies access to viewing that imaging. And it's through these technologies that we're bringing to market that let them do that. And the thing we've done with Fuji is not only on the technology side, but on the licensing side. So if you're a small pharma client or a biotech, and you want to use the technology, if you go to Fujifilm and ask to license it, you're going to get a $500,000 price tag. But the reality is the small sponsor doesn't need their own instance of that whole enterprise technology. They just need a small piece of it. And so what we've done is deployed it into our data center and created a multi-tenant version of it, where a sponsor can actually license just a small fraction of that. And so they don't have to take on the whole cost of it. And suddenly it gives a small sponsor the full capabilities of the platform without having to actually invest that kind of money in it. And then, of course, it opens up a whole other world to them, including around machine learning and AI. And you mentioned, coming out of IBM Watson, having access to clinical data is obviously important for that. But the medical imaging assets are something that's sort of newer to the ML AI space. Obviously, there's a lot of startups that are working on machine learning projects around medical imaging, but it's probably only in the last sort of 3-4 years where that started taking off. And again, they need to be able to access images and not just have them on a file share on a local network. It's got to be in a more structured, queryable fashion. And this VNA technology lets us do that. And then we can even programmatically give access to a third party to just a subset of the images for one particular client, as opposed to obviously access to the whole database. So it's creating sort of new opportunities in the marketplace that just weren't out there. There's a lot of companies that have a vision, but they don't know how to actually get the infrastructure underneath it to make it happen. we're even in discussions with some large med device companies that they're already making MRI machines, and they've sold millions of them or thousands of them into the institutions, but they're looking for ways to actually streamline the the whole healthcare process and make the imaging that their machines are generating more easily accessible to either other sites or get them faster into an OR, and create a value-added layer on top of the technology that they've developed. And so we're in a lot of discussions with med device companies like that to actually use the VNA as sort of the engine behind powering these new workflows and use cases, so that they can generate incremental revenue on top of the devices they already sell. So it's an interesting time. There's a lot of fun things going on right now. And the other one that's exciting too is and Eric and Martin, maybe you guys have come up against it already, is that the category of software as a medical device. Because we're little folks on the imaging side, there are a lot of companies that are looking at machine learning algorithms to detect disease, either from medical imaging, acoustical files, etc. And again, they also need to have a really powerful platform to not only aggregate the imaging, but have programmatic access to it. So that whole area is growing. And from a regulatory perspective, Eric and Martin, I think those companies are really struggling with how to get this stuff approved, like what the regulatory path is, because not only are they device, but they're software, which makes it even more confusing.
If I may add a little something to what you're saying, the reality of all of this is we have one expert in-house that only does software.
Okay.
And what he does is he has to read every week to see what the updates are, because the FDA, Health Canada, and the notified bodies in Europe are updating their ways of evaluating things on a weekly, monthly basis.
That's
We've
crazy.
got people that come to us that said, oh yeah, we did that research 6 months ago and we know we're doing this for the right reason. And we have to tell them that was actually really true at that time. And not only that, the other things that people have to consider is there are more and more stringent rules about data privacy. So the data transfer, the information of patients and all that, there's actually an ISO standard just associated to that. So all of this has made these realities very moving targets, if I may say it that way. And we have to explain to some, because we deal with regulatory, we often have time, we have to sit down with these companies and tell them, careful about what you're claiming. If you're saying you're doing artificial intelligence, then be careful. There's going to be bigger hurdles for you to pass. If you're just doing an algorithm, just say it's an algorithm.
Yeah.
There's a different way, depending on what you claim and what you actually do can be very different, and the path can be different. So all of that has to be reflected upon. So I don't know if it adds to what you're saying, but that's my here.
Yeah.
Say physician assist, it goes over a lot better with the doctors, and it's easier to pass the clinical trials like that.
Actually, right now we're doing we're doing a lot of work on clinical trials. And we were talking with Chris and Heather before that. We have companies, and you're talking about doctors. Doctors often, and I apologize if I'm insulting anybody, but they're sometimes our biggest challenge.
Sure.
They come to us and they say, we want that device to be approved. Yes. But to get it approved, you know it's going to save lives and everything, you have to do it in a certain way or you won't be recognized. Yeah, but I want to do a clinical trial. So why do you want to do your clinical trial? Because I want to see it works. Well, how do you quantify it? Are you going to gather data that you're going to be able to use in the future? So all of that, and oftentimes doctors, PhDs have been right so often in their life. So for us to try and tell them that they are kind of right, but they should be tweaking their things is a challenge.
Everybody's kid's the cutest one, right? When they're born. Hey, look at
Yeah.
this baby. It's mine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's I don't know, Nancy, if it adds to what you were thinking, but that's our challenge with doctors.
Well, I
Eric,
mean,
do
there's
you
a big, sorry, go ahead, Nancy,
Never mind.
please.
Eric, do you work for the same company as Martin?
Yeah. We're
Okay.
Yes.
I scribbled that in my notes. I thought that was the case.
I was going to say, I'm not intelligent enough to be alone with you guys, so I had to tag on the thing to make you feel a whole lot more intelligent.
Gotcha.
I find there's some interesting, particularly with people who are doing sort of this software as a device, is that there's not a lot of forethought to the end result of it. We want to do a clinical trial and prove that this works. It's cool, it's neat, it's fun, and it's great. But where is what's happening? If you're in the US, where's your reimbursement? If you're where is it going? Sure, that's great. Are you doing direct to consumer? Okay, what's that going to look like? It's pretty muddy right now. There's a lot of questions there. So I imagine Eric and Marta, this is a challenge for you.
So just for your information, in the chat box, I'm going to be typing something. It's actually for anyone who's interested. It's actually a guidance document on software as a medical device that was put forward by Health Canada.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Definitely will check that out.
Just to give you an idea of the ins and outs.
It's great reading before bedtime. You will fall asleep and have a good 8 hours. I can guarantee that.
Fantastic. What else are we doing during COVID times anyway, right?
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually,
The other part, I am surprised, and I'm glad you shared that with us. The speed at which the regulatory authorities are kind of sort of changing things around medical devices. I knew it was going quick, but I didn't realize you guys were watching this weekly.
Well, I'll say weekly, but it's just at the, give you another example of 3D printing. 3D printing has become a very big thing.
Yeah.
And the FDA is periodically updating the way it looks at 3D printing, because can you guarantee it's going to be homogeneous? Can you guarantee and that becomes, so people that use 3D printing think they're at the front edge of technology, when in reality, they might be, but on the regulatory side, they're putting themselves into a bind where they're going to have to demonstrate a whole lot more things. So it's always about the balance between what you want to do, what you should do, and finding the right way to use your claims and get to your market.
That's so interesting. I hadn't even thought about 3D printing in this scope. I hadn't even thought.
Yeah, the guys at Robarts, now Alimentive, invested heavily in 3D printing with I don't know the names of the machines, but they print in surgical steels.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they are, stainless steel and things like that. And so they've been doing a lot in that space. So it's definitely here, but does that also mean that the machines themselves, like the process of printing, has to be proven as well?
This is where you get me to my level of incompetence, and I tell you, I have somebody internally that's so much more knowledgeable than me that can get you the answer.
Because obviously there's the thing that's being made, but those are bespoke. That's the whole point of machine 3D printing.
Yeah.
Right. It's, you're printing an implant that perfectly matches the patient.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it would have to be sort of the process in the software.
There you go.
The mapping, the 3D modeling that is then validated so that you can demonstrate that what is produced at the end of each unique piece is consistent.
And all of that is driven by your quality management system that encompasses everything that you're building. And that gets us to me boring you to death. But all that to say is that's the reality.
That's definitely a complicated platform to bring.
Technology is great. We deal in that, as I was telling you, we deal with people that are so intelligent, trying to move things so much faster than what the authorities are able to catch up with.
Yeah.
On our side, our job is to say to people, software, you have, if you're building a software, you have to stop a version at a point in time,
Mhm.
because in your software verification and validation, if you are not, then the device you're getting to be certain to trying to get the certification might not be the one you put to market, and you might have to redo the whole certification process for your new updated version. So
Yeah.
you've got to have a hard stop at a point in time, say this is my version 1, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Again, I'm not supposed to be talking. I'm supposed to be listening. You're not.
No, this is great.
It's all interesting, Eric.
Martin is laughing at me, so you always
No,
laugh at
Like
me.
usual, like
It's-
usual.
That's the way these things go. You know, we always meant this, whether there are a lot of folks or a few folks, just to be super conversational. And
Yeah, that's the whole point of this meeting. It is to be a, a
this
conversation.
is the bar after you left the conference and you didn't, you don't want to go up to your room and put your feet up. So you just meet up with everybody that you were just on the floor with and just catch up on all those things that you wanted to talk about that you didn't get a chance to talk about. So whatever it might be, that's great.
The only thing missing is a drink. You're saying what?
True.
I got a
True.
smoothie. Does that count?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely.
I've got some
Depending
whiskey.
on what you put into your smoothie, but yeah. Go on now.
The privacy side of this stuff is also challenging. One of the reasons the project we did at the end of the year with the French pharma client is because they didn't want any of their imaging to leave France, because they didn't want to have to manage any regulatory issues or anything like that. And the people that needed to see it were not in France.
Yep.
They were
I know.
actually-
And by the way, Canada is right now is lax,
Yep.
but our expert has told us that within a short period of time, we're going to be the more stringent of the Canada, US, Europe trio.
Oh,
Really?
Yep.
Well, good to know.
Wow.
And Eric, do you have any more feedback on that about what's happening or coming or?
Yeah.
The one thing that could be of interest to you guys, and I say you guys, anybody that does clinical trials, is that the European regulation is changing in regards to medical devices. And I won't go into everything because I don't know everything. The one thing I do know is, and this is a huge difference between drugs and medical devices. When we talk about drugs, there's always extra zeros and extra number of patients and extra numbers of everything.
Yeah.
Medical devices are smaller in their nature and their sizes, but it's not the same market approach. All that to say is in Europe, they are putting forth a new regulation. And again, I'm not going to go too far because I don't want this to be, my knowledge level is limited, so I don't want to go outside of that. But what I do know is even for devices, because in Europe there are 4 classes of devices, and it used to be that class 1s were very low on what the requirements were.
Mhm.
And now they're going to be much more stringent. And in the end run, they're going to have to do what's called post-market surveillance.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to make sure that everything on their device has been proven, not just before, but as people are using it. And
Yeah, real world. Yeah.
for you guys, for anybody that does trials, they're not going to be 1,000 patients trials, but every single company that's never done anything before, that's going to open a market for them. Because
I'm taking notes.
please do, no, but that's
Yeah.
this is
No,
where
that's great.
this is when we were talking to you about CROs. There are realities where CROs don't know about these opportunities. They don't know what's out there.
Yeah.
And these are small niche, but for a small CRO, it might be just an interesting niche market where they can start specializing and nobody else is going to look at them because there are not enough zeros after.
Oh,
We're gonna have to
interesting.
talk
Okay.
afterwards, Eric.
Okay.
It's a joint marketing campaign in our future.
The marketing guy is the one who laughs at me right now with the mute button on. So don't hesitate to contact him.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. We are, just as with the pandemic, in some markets, obviously it's hit the service industry really hard. For us, it's been a bit of a boom in the sense that we've had all of these COVID studies, But at the same time, it's really pushed the industry forward on this, this idea of decentralized trials, remote monitoring,
Mhm.
risk-based monitoring, limit the number of on-site visit or in-site visits and so on. So, like disruption like this often leads to market opportunities if we're paying attention.
If you're nimble.
Nimble, yeah, exactly, right. Yeah. The EU dropping Privacy Shield last year didn't help us. That, to me, that was a surprise. I did not see that coming. Did you guys see that coming?
I don't have enough knowledge to give
Yeah.
you a yes or no on that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It just caught us by surprise. It was like I just saw it in my news feed one day. I was like, holy
Wait,
crap.
what?
They did what? Because our data center's in the US.
Okay.
Primary data center. So it was interesting. I was surprised that they made a move that quickly. I figured, like the FDA, that takes a decade to do anything. I figured there'd be a lot of news before anything happened, but it just kind of dropped like that.
In certain cases, they go very fast.
Yeah.
So,
The privacy side for medical imaging is complicated. So I'll get specifically with personally identifiable information, PHI and PII, because in a medical imaging file, for example, it's not just the images that can have patient data in them, but it's all the metadata.
Yeah, how do you strip that out when it's a bunch of bits, huh?
Well, and it's not easy. And to complicate things even more, if you're doing a clinical trial that's using imaging, you've got, let's say you've got more than one site. Let's say you've got 3 sites. The devices that those sites use are different. So therefore, the data that's automatically in these files varies by device. But then those institutions also have a process or protocol for what data they want to store in these files, and that's different from all 3. And so when we're aggregating the imaging, it has to be de-identified, and it's not only that text data in the metadata, but also burned into the actual images, the pixel data. And if it's a DICOM file, it's not just one image; it could be 1,000.
Yeah.
And so,
And have you thought about if there's like a stent or some kind of a medical device inside the person, the X-ray, would the serial number show?
That's so interesting.
I don't know how you're going to pull that one out.
I
yeah,
like that one,
exactly,
Nancy.
the
That's
pixel data,
interesting.
it could be there, yeah. So there are, for the metadata, it's a little bit easier because you can have algorithms that can go through all the points and do some natural language processing. On the pixel data, it's a lot harder, and it often ends up being where you do a bunch of automated processing, but then you still have to do a manual QC check to make sure nothing was missed. It's very complicated, and that's where sponsors start to get a little stressed when planning a large trial like that, because this is something that's complicated, and complicated usually ends up meaning expensive.
Yeah, think about doing that in MRI. That's painful, or a CT.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have we're in discussions with one particular institution, and they've got millions of images they want to process and make available. So if you're talking about 1,000 images, a partially manual process isn't so much of a big deal. It's some labor. But when you're talking 5 million or 10 million images, you've got to find a better, more programmatic way. So there's some opportunities there, and we're obviously not experts in imaging de-identification. We've got some process and tools, but we work with another partner called AG MedNet. They're experts at actually moving imaging. So they have hardware devices that you can attach to like an MRI machine in an institution, and then their device actually talks through a private network to their own data center and to wherever else it needs to go. And so they can actually ship imaging very quickly right from the device. But along the way, they've got processing algorithms for doing de-identification and a few other things as well. So we work with partners like that to try and make it a little bit easier, less complicated. Yeah.
Goes back to what Eric and Martin were saying about the fact that there's a lot of folks out there that don't quite know how to handle a medical or device combo with it. It's so complex when they have all these layers.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're on the hour now already.
Snuck up on us.
It did.
A small
Um,
group, but a good group. It was great to have you all here.
Yeah, and
Thank
you know,
you.
from Heather and I, we apologize for having to move the meeting. It was supposed to be last week, but at the last minute, our guest had an unforeseen family medical problem, and so we had to reschedule. But we're on for March. The date's set, so we hope to see you there. And now that we are not moving the March one, we fully anticipate having a much larger audience for everyone to interact with. So we're looking forward to seeing all of you guys there
Perfect,
for that
Chris.
next one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Michael. Thanks.
It was
thank
great
you.
to
Thank
see
you.
you all. We'll follow up
Bye.
Nice to meet you
offline.
guys.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for
Okay.
dropping in, Nancy.
Bye.
See you again,
Take
Fran.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Michael. We know
Bye,
you're not here,
Michael.
but you're here.